Start the presentation for today. You ready, Robert?
Yeah, this is great.
Let's go do it. All right, sounds good. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the community meeting for the Stierlin Road Bicycle and Pedestrian Improvements Project. My name is Mary Chris Huang. I'm an associate civil engineer with the City of Mountain View. And with me, helping me administer tonight's meeting is Robert Gonzalez, principal civil engineer. Would you like to say hi to everyone, Robert?
Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Thank you. And so on this project, the city recently received a $4 million Quick Strike grant from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC for short, for this project. And so our goal is to deliver the project quickly, and tonight's meeting will help us understand the community's needs. So a few things before we kick off the presentation. Just wanted to go over some of the meeting's logistics. So starting off, all participants are currently muted. This presentation is being recorded, and the presentation slides as well as the recording will be posted on the city website. I'll provide a link towards the end of the presentation. And we will definitely be taking in your questions throughout the presentation. And we will also have a Q&A portion towards the end. So how to submit your questions? There's a couple ways. You can either click on the raise hand icon. As an example, Ruth England use the raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen. So thanks for sampling that. If you're joining in by phone, you could also press *9. And or you could also type in your question in the chat box. And at this time, you could put in your question at any time during the meeting, and we'll try to get to it as soon as we can. So for tonight's presentation, this is just a quick overview. This will be the order of topics we'll be going over. And so without further ado, we'll start with the project background. So the City of Mountain View's proposal of the traffic modifications and improvements for this project is based on the Shoreline Boulevard Corridor Study. The city completed the study in 2014 with special emphasis on bike and pedestrian improvements, and the recommendations were approved by the City Council later that year. This plan prioritizes connectivity between the transit station and the North Bay Shore area, accessibility of multimodal solutions, and safety for all users, especially pedestrians and bicyclists. The Shoreline Boulevard Corridor Study also offers a new vision for Shoreline Boulevard corridor and aims to transform Shoreline Boulevard and Stierlin Road into multimodal corridors. So implementing traffic elements like the ones we'll be seeing shortly will help reduce vehicle speeds and improve safety for all users. So shown here is the project location and the limits. So starting from left of what we see here, we have Middlefield, which if we continue going north, we get to 101. So hopefully you can see my cursor. And so yes, pointing towards the north, we'll be going towards 101. And then we kind of travel south, hit kind of the Safeway Commercial Plaza and the Buddhist Temple. And then we continue going south till we hit almost Central Expressway and later the Transit Center. And so this is the project limits kind of shown in an aerial. So the study included conceptual improvements and modifications along Shoreline Boulevard between Middlefield Road and Montecito Avenue, the intersection of Shoreline Boulevard, Montecito Avenue, and Stierlin Road, which is near the Safeway Plaza, the Stierlin Road slip ramp, which is right here, near the Buddhist temple, and then along Stierlin Road. So proposed improvements would provide a direct bike and ped connection to the transit center, to the Shoreline Boulevard, as well as the future Shoreline Boulevard reversible transit lane. So now I'd like to take a quick pause here to conduct a poll. Just like to ask the attendees, what mode of transportation do you typically use throughout this area? You may select all that apply, so please answer as best you can. So I'll go ahead, oops, sorry about that. See if I could activate this poll. All right, so hopefully everyone sees a poll in progress. Great, seeing responses coming in. Oh, sorry, Robert, you're muted.
There we go. So we're at 11 people responding. So that's and for folks who can't see, we have 14 people participating on this call. So that's pretty good. 12 people responding now. Maybe Mary, Chris, and I are the last holdouts. But we've got 67% walking, 75% biking, 92% driving, and well, maybe there's no real, maybe the public transit is all on Shoreline rather than on Stierlin, but thank you all for participating. I think those were good results.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the polls kind of came at a stop. So thanks, Robert, for reading that off. To just reiterate it, for walking, we had about 8 of the 12 responders saying that they usually walk around this area, about 9 out of 12 for biking, and 11 out of 12 of driving. All right, so thank you all for your participation. All right, oh, here we go. We could also share the results. There we go. Oops, sorry. All right, so now I'll continue the presentation. All right. So the preliminary designs you'll be seeing from here on were developed per the study's recommendations. As shown here, we'll first focus on the proposed improvements between Middlefield Road, sorry about that, Middlefield Road on the left or northern part, and Montecito, which is kind of off the page, but south of this segment along Shoreline Boulevard. The top left image here shows the existing alignment. So as we can see here, each direction of travel shows 2 driving lanes, each direction, and 1 bike lane. There's also a center turning lane in the middle. Now the proposed improvements we see on the bottom right shows the same number of vehicle and bike lanes, but includes adding a 1.5 to 2 foot buffer between the bicyclists and drivers. So going south, here we hit a proposed crosswalk, mid-block crosswalk. It is pretty much going to be, we propose to have it located near the frontage of the Buddhist temple and connecting it to the Safeway Plaza. And this is, the proposed improvement is similar to the existing enhanced crosswalk that we have south of Central along Shoreline, as seen on this bottom right image. So the planned crosswalk will also be striped with high visibility striping and a refuge area will be provided in the middle island. So continuing south towards the signalized intersection between Shoreline Boulevard, Montecito Avenue, and Stierlin Road, various improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians are proposed per the concept here. Improvements include the elements of a typical protected intersection, such as but not limited to corner of safety islands, protected corner areas, pedestrian and bike crosswalks, which would be high visibility, and new ADA compliant curb ramps. The signal at this intersection will also be updated to provide a protected left turn coming from Montecito Avenue and Stierlin Road. So now moving on to the Stierlin Road improvement. So just looking at Stierlin Road. So various improvements are proposed to help reduce the traffic speed, improve bike level of traffic stress, and improve pedestrian amenities with minimal parking impact to the neighbors. So I'll be walking through each section, starting from the left or northernmost part of Stierlin Road. For reference, north is just going to be closer to the Shoreline Boulevard, south heading towards Central Expressway. So starting with the Stierlin slip ramp located in front of the Buddhist temple. We have greenback sharrows like the one pictured being proposed to be implemented. Now moving on to the section label 2.2, new bike lanes in both the north and south direction. Our plan with the bike lane going in the south direction or away from Shoreline Boulevard, having buffers. So there'll be a minimal loss of 2 to 3 parking spaces as a result of these improvements. So for section 3.3, we will be adding new bike lanes in each direction as well. These improvements will fit between the existing travel lane and parking lane. And as we near Central Expressway, we hit the last stretch of Stierlin Road. For this section, we'll be proposing greenback sharrows and other traffic calming enhancements, including bulb outs and high visibility crosswalks, specifically at Central Avenue and Stierlin. And new light poles will also be added to enhance pedestrian level activity and visibility at night. So that wraps up the preliminary design aspect. Now I'd like to go over the anticipated project schedule, next steps for the project. The top being listed, tonight's community meeting. We wanted to gather your feedback and hear your thoughts on the project so that we can incorporate any changes moving on to the next step. We will also be bringing the project to the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or BPAC for short, in their August meeting. So I'll be sending out notices closer to that BPAC meeting date. Then we also anticipate wrapping up design around fall next year, and construction will follow. So with that said, I think now we would like to open it up to questions.
So I think we can start with some questions that are in the chat. And as we go through these, we'll see if we have any folks raising their hand as well. So let's start with some of Bruce's questions. How will anticipated traffic from the 1265 Montecito Avenue project come into play with this project in terms of increased conflicts with pedestrians and cyclists? So the project was in the study phase for a while, and I was not involved in the project at the time. So I'm going to actually ask one of our traffic engineers, the city's traffic engineer, Lorenzo Lopez to step on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to read the next. I'm going to need to read the next question while he steps in here. So Bruce also asked why we chose to establish the span of the project, or the section of the projects finishing at Middlefield rather than going further north. And Lorenzo also had a response to that question. So Lorenzo, are you able to respond to either of those?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Lorenzo Lopez, traffic engineer. Repeat the first question. I didn't quite get that one.
How will anticipated traffic from the 1265 Montecito Avenue project come into play with this project in terms of increased conflicts with pedestrians and bicyclists? So I don't know how recent 1265 Montecito was actually proposed or approved by the city, or where that is in the review process.
Actually, I'll have to be honest, I don't either. But if it's on Montecito, the purpose of the project at that Shoreline Montecito intersection is to provide a protected intersection. So by providing protected left turns, both on Montecito and on Stierlin, that eliminates conflicts with bikes and peds as they cross Shoreline. So that's a big deal at that signalized intersection, in addition to all the protected features that are being added as elements of the protected intersection. So those conflicts will be eliminated with the protected left turns in both directions on Montecito and Stierlin Road. Going the Shoreline corridor, the project stops at Middlefield because the Shoreline reversible transit lane project picks up from that point north, and that will be adding cycle tracks or protected bike lanes on both sides of Shoreline, and a protected intersection at Shoreline Middlefield, the Shoreline Middlefield intersection. That project's actually started, construction has started, and it's a pretty hefty project. There's a lot of intersections that are involved, starting from Shoreline all the way to Pear. So all of those intersections will be reconstructed as part of the project, along with bike facilities along that stretch. So that's why it stopped at Middlefield. That project continues bike improvements north of that.
Right.
Hopefully
so there
I
won't be a gap. There won't be a gap for ped and bike improvements between this project and the bus lane project.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. I see a hand up. Greg next. I'm going to go ahead and ask him to speak next. Greg, you can go ahead.
I have a question about the Shoreline Montecito Stierlin intersection. If you could get that slide up, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, well, there you go. Okay, so the way it works now is that, I don't know if you can see my cursor, I doubt it, but if you're approaching Shoreline on Montecito, there's a left turn lane and a right, and sort of a right turn lane there now. And so if you're going straight across Shoreline, you sort of get in the middle lane, I'll say. And to this day, I still don't know if there's a detection loop there, because there's always seems to be a car that comes up one side or the other that triggers the light. But what you do at that point is, when the light turns green, you go directly across the street onto Stierlin, and then there's no markings there at all for bicyclists. But there's usually very little traffic going that way. But with the new intersection here, would you still be able to do that? Basically, go straight across Shoreline, or would you have to deviate off to the right behind that little island there, and then over get on the bike lane on the other side after you cross the intersection and go behind that other little island on the other side of the street? So it seems like it's a little more of an encumbrance for the bicyclist to have to go through the protected intersection when they can just go straight across.
I can take that if you want.
Yeah,
This is Lorenzo again. That you're welcome to choose either one. Just because it's a protected intersection, you're not forced to ride in that
okay.
green area. If you wanted to drive like a vehicle in the vehicle lane, you can.
So will there be sharrows on the other side, on the Stierlin Road side?
On the other side, not until you pass, I believe it's Fountain Park Lane or Windmill Park.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, so the sharrows won't start until you pass that. Bike lanes will pick up, and you'll be able to actually slide over into the bike lane once you cross the intersection and pass the protected. There's a protected island or buffer between the bike lane and the vehicle lane. Once you pass that protected raised area, you can slide over into the bike lane and continue in the bike lane until the bike lane goes away. Then there'll be sharrows.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Lorenzo.
So Bruce had another question. Can native drought-tolerant, pollinator-friendly landscaping be introduced in the island where Stierlin and Shoreline meet? So at this point, Bruce, that's not part of the project scope, but we're at this point, we're really kicking off the design process. So there's a lot to do in the project itself. The slides that Mary Chris went through is a lot to put into the design already. So we're gonna have our hands full trying to reach our deadline that was established by the grant that we received. But we can look at that. I mean, those are opportunities and we shouldn't pass them up if we have the funding and if we have the resources to put those in. So we'll look at landscaping opportunities as we go through the design process. Let's see. Matthew, I apologize, Ferrugia, at the Shoreline Montesino-Stierlin intersection, the lanes need to be widened going north as people making U-turns after exiting Safeway to go back north on Shoreline very often have to make three-point turns. So we're here at the correct slide. This is slide 12 showing that intersection. So at the top of your page, that left-hand turn from Shoreline is the one that folks coming from Safeway would make a right out of the Safeway parking lot and make a U-turn at that left turn lane to go north onto Shoreline. So we don't have plans to widen that for cars. The benefit of this project is really to benefit pedestrian and bike traffic in this intersection. So we can certainly look at that, but it looks like that turning movement is going to be more challenging and not less challenging. And then continuing on, so is the protected bike lane on the north side of Stierlin from Washington to the slip ramp, which would have eliminated all parking on that side of the road, no longer in the plans. So thank you for remembering what the other plans looked like. That's correct. We're not eliminating all of the parking along Stierlin at this point. So I think there's a couple areas where the slip ramp actually begins on Stierlin that are pretty narrow. So we may have to take 2 or 3 parking spaces in that specific area where the slip ramp splits off towards Shoreline, but we're not removing parking going towards Washington. And we have a few more questions here. Let me see if we can get through them. Oh, Greg's hand is back up. Let's jump over there. Greg, I think. Mary Chris, can you try to unmute him? I don't seem to be getting that button.
Oh yeah, sure. Greg? Are you there? Sorry, I'm pressing it, but
Greg, can you try to talk? Yeah, I don't think he's actually restricted. So Greg, if you want to ask a question, go right ahead.
No, sorry, I
Oh,
have
there we go.
a hand down.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. But we did get another raised hand.
Oh, okay.
Mark Huson. Let's see.
Mark, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi, Mark. Are you there? Oh, sorry. The feedback is not very clear. Are you hearing feedback, Robert? Yeah. Sorry,
I can
Mark.
hear something, and I can't make out what he's trying to ask us. So he did post a question earlier. So let's go back to his question.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Mark.
All right. Sorry about that. I have occasional audio problems when connecting. So the first question is well, first the could you go back to the pedestrian crossing across shoreline?
Oh, sure. This one.
Yes. So this crossing is this is not the side that people actually cross on currently. People tend to cross on the other side of the Safeway driveway. And I'm concerned that if you put the crosswalk in the wrong place, then people may not use it as much and continue to jaywalk across shoreline, which I see all the time. So what do you think about moving it to the other side of the driveway?
So thank you for that, Mark. I appreciate it. So I believe during the preliminary design phase, multiple locations were looked at, and I think there is a driveway conflict if you move it too far northward with a current and a proposed development. We could certainly reach out to our designers and look at that to understand better why they selected this location. But I think during the preliminary design, we looked at both sides of this Safeway driveway as potential alternatives, and this was where we landed on to really kind of reduce the number of conflicts with those driveways. Lorenzo, do you have anything to add to that?
You're right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You're right, Robert, that different locations were looked at, and the conflicts with the multiple driveways with the driveway on one side and the multiple driveways on the other side led to the placement of it at this location. It's up to the pedestrian to find the safest path, and if they'd rather cross at an uncontrolled area rather than take a few extra steps to get to a push button, this will be a push button pedestrian activated flashing lights. So I imagine someone would want to go to that location and cross because it would be a little safer. But I can't stop people from crossing anywhere else. But we did look at multiple locations, and this is where it landed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So a few more questions in the chat. Will speed limit reductions be explored, especially given expected passage of AB 43? Lorenzo can perhaps answer the last question as well. Oh, nice, Bruce.
Same response as other times this question has been asked. We have to, by law, we have to set the speed limits based on an engineering and traffic study that's done. And if the law does change, then we can adjust the way we do these speed surveys. But a reduction in speed has to be enforceable. And if we were to just post signs and reduce the speed, police wouldn't be able to enforce without a certified traffic survey. So until the law changes, we're not able to arbitrarily reduce the speed limit in these locations.
Yeah, and I would add to that that the cross section east of here going or south of here on Stierlin, that cross section 3 shows that the addition of the bike lanes better defines the traffic lane for autos. So right now the existing lane is 15 feet wide for automobiles, and that's going to be reduced down to 11. So we know that that has some traffic calming effects immediately. So that's going to be a benefit there. Bruce also noted that Montecito is a bike boulevard, so that comes into play. So that's a benefit right there. So we're that intersection is extending that bike boulevard and making that connection to Stierlin safer and onto Shoreline. Are there going to be no turn on red restrictions?
Yes, and I think for this question, Lorenzo responded in the chat. No turn on red restrictions will be determined as part of the design. So thanks, Lorenzo, for answering that question.
Yes, thank you. Does this project include repaving the slip ramp, or can that be done sooner? It reminds me of an amusement park ride. Okay, thank you, Mark. So I'm responsible for the paving in the city, as well as projects like this, which are more transit or transportation oriented. And I
We lost Robert there. Sorry, while we wait for him to get back online, I'll continue on. Pedestrians, a question from Bruce. Pedestrians regularly cross Shoreline to and from Safeway. Anything planned to address this? Now, Bruce, maybe you could weigh in. Are you referring to this mid-block crosswalk? I'll ask to mute you.
Thanks. Yeah, so the question was already answered in terms of this
Oh.
crossing that you have on the screen right now. But the earlier commenter mentioned that people actually cross, well, here further to the left.
Right.
And I think that it's because there is that complex that I think it's an apartment complex across the street. So people who live there are going back and forth, right, with their grocery bags and stuff from Safeway. They might not want to go all the way over here. I agree with Lorenzo that it's certainly an improvement, but they might not want to do that if they're lugging a lot of groceries and stuff back and forth. They still might want to cross that other location. Without seeing the driveways and everything, it's hard to know exactly where the problems are that Lorenzo was describing with driveways and so on. And maybe that's something, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but this crossing location, I think, is not ideally placed.
Great, valued feedback.
Mary Chris, sorry about that. I'm back now.
No problem. Glad to have you back, Robert. We just had like a quick leeway to the one of Bruce's questions about the Shoreline crosswalk.
Sure.
But I'll just go ahead and, oh, yes, go ahead, Robert.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you want me to go back to the previous comment about paving.
Yes, please, that would be great.
Yes. So I was in the middle of saying that if I'm responsible for the paving in the city, I would love to pave all of it, but we do have budgetary restrictions. So it's a little challenging to get to all of the paving. We probably have budget to slurry seal the whole section, not just the slip ramp, but the whole corridor as part of this project. I think the paving condition is kind of marginal throughout the whole thing. A slurry won't solve all of the roller coaster features of the road, but I'll drive it again. I'll have a look at it to see if there's something that we can do during the design process. So thank you for bringing that up.
So now we are to James' question. Wouldn't it be possible to also implement traffic calming to make it so that the 85% speed was lower. Lorenzo, would you mind taking that question? I think it might also relate to explaining what's enforceable for speeds and what AB 43 is.
Sure. For a corridor like Shoreline and the volume of traffic, it's one of our major corridors, as you all know. So the type of traffic calming is limited that we can implement in this area. And Robert kind of mentioned already the reduction of the lane widths helps to reduce the speeds. The implementation of the buffer between the bike lane and the vehicle lane will help, which we're proposing to have a raised buffer in that area. So that, will definitely help with the safety for the cyclists as well. But as far as anything more major like a speed hump, it's not something that I would recommend on this corridor.
Thank you.
I see that Greg's hand is back up.
Yeah, I just have some questions or some comments on the what we're looking at here, the mid-block crossing. First of all, it's desperately needed. I drive, this is the route I take to go to downtown Mountain View typically when I'm driving, not riding my bike. And there are frequently people jaywalking across this area here. It's not necessarily one place, but I do vaguely remember that one of the reasons why we're putting a crosswalk here is that as this property to the top of the chart here is being redeveloped, I believe there's going to be a pedestrian path that comes behind the development. It would connect with this crosswalk from above that leads around the development and comes into here. So that would be a logical place to put the crosswalk right here. Mm-hmm. And while I've got you, could I have you explain to me what these red dots are and the numbering system?
Sure. Oh, so I explained that some of these red dots that you can see are supposed to symbolize signals. It's not signals, signs, posted signs. So kind of just like crosswalk ahead or pedestrian crossing signs. Then we have these as signifying the signal or the mast arms that will have the LED flashing.
Yeah, that's one of my questions. Are these is this signage or are these actually flashing lights or what is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Slide 11.
Yes.
There we go. So this is the Dana Shoreline crosswalk. So we'll have similar they won't be the school signs, but there'll be a flashing beacon and a pedestrian crossing sign.
Okay, so there will be beacons. Okay, good. Yeah, it's needed. Yeah, particularly in the wintertime, there are people, and when it's dark, are crossing here. It's scary. It really is. I'm surprised we haven't had any accidents in this area to date, but we're lucky. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mark, you had another comment?
Yes, I was wondering if there were any plans for the sign in the island in the middle of between the slip ramp and Shoreline middle field, the one that says "Welcome to Mountain View" and has lots of what would you call them, emblems on it. I think it harkens back to a time when Mountain View's borders didn't extend beyond Montecito, but now it's just kind of quaint. I don't mind it there. I kind of like it, but I was just wondering if there's any plans to change it.
Not that I know of, and certainly not part of this project. We're not going to touch it unless somebody tells us to. Some folks probably have a connection to that sign, and other folks, probably like yourself, have learned to just kind of pass by and notice it and then move on with their day. So I can bring that up to my boss, but at this part of in terms of this project, it's going to stay where it is. Thank you. Let's see. So Matthew said +1 for repaving the slip lane. A slurry coat won't be enough. It's really in terrible shape and would be a waste of money to paint a bike lane on a road in this condition. So as I mentioned before, I'll drive it. I'll ride it on a bike. I want to understand it better. So we'll take a look at that during the design. He's correct there. There is a bike ped path as part of that. Oh, Lorenzo's responding here. He's correct that there is a bike ped path as part of that project connecting to Middlefield. So I don't know the schedule for that project. So we are designing it to connect to that bike ped path. But this project is probably going to go in before that bike ped path. Arthur Korn commented or asked, are there any plans for a ped bike passage through the aqueduct corridor? This would reduce detour to Safeway for residents to the east. I agree with that, Arthur. The city and SFPUC don't always see eye to eye on the best use of their aqueduct corridor. The city has some benefits on the corridor. You've probably seen some linear parks or some neighborhood parks on the corridor and some areas that are open for pedestrian traffic. But SFPUC has really clamped down over the last few years on their use of the aqueducts corridor. They see it as property that they need to protect. Those aqueducts are not getting any younger. So the city actually entered into an MOU with SFPUC, severely restricting the city's use of those corridors. So at this point, the answer is no. We're always happy to go back to SFPUC and keep those relationships going and have those kind of a diplomatic tie at this point where they are the big person at the table and we're one of several small entities that they have to work with. So at this point, I don't see a benefit there that we can actually deliver anytime soon. Bruce mentioned, I mentioned earlier, a desire for native drought tolerant pollinator friendly landscaping in that island space. So yes, we noted that one. And then Ed responded. So Ed is my boss. Ed is the assistant public works director. So there are no plans for a ped bike pathway on SFPUC, but development projects on east side near crosswalk would install a pedestrian bike path from Shoreline to Middlefield. Okay, that's a good update for that section of Middlefield where that mid-block crossing is. Thank you. Did we miss anything, Mary Chris?
Not that that's been in now. Oh, I think we just got another raised hand. So go ahead and unmute Mark.
Thank you. So I was just wondering if the project was approved in November of 2014, how did it take 6.5 years to get to today's meeting?
Well, it's a fair question. And the first part of my question would probably be regarding workload. There's a lot of projects and a lot of priorities for the city. And as far as I know, the transportation planning group of the city has really been growing in the last few years. So it was really an effort to put plans together in that early time frame for these projects. And once those plans were put in place, then we started implementing individual projects from those plans. And maybe this one was just not on the top of that priority list. Maybe there could have been other plans and projects that were delivered ahead of this. I can ask either Lorenzo or Ed to answer this question further. So Ed, I think you have the floor.
Hi, Robert. Thanks. This is Ed Arango. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director and City Engineer. So I just wanted to provide some feedback on timing. So the corridor study, and it absolutely makes sense, and I can understand the question of the timing. There is a long delay between a study and an implementation. So when the city conducts feasibility studies, really it's an opportunity to identify what is the projects that would are needed for a specific corridor. So at this, with the corridor study, it identified the entire corridor, as Mary Chris mentioned, basically from just north of the transit center, all the way up to the Pear Shoreline intersection. What falls out of that study is the project, and we can't do, because of the scope of the project, it's so large, it's really difficult for the city to take on such a large project. So we usually carve it up into smaller projects. And as Mary Chris mentioned, one of the other projects that's currently in construction is the shoreline corridor from Montecito Shoreline intersection. I'm sorry, from the Middlefield Shoreline intersection north to the Pear Shoreline intersection. And that's a large construction project for us. So when feasibility studies are conducted, projects fall out of them, and then we need to program them. And so in order to program them, we need to find funding for them. So as Robert mentioned, it really is a balancing act between the funding and other priority projects that we're trying to implement all at the same time, as we recognize there's just a host of projects that need to get implemented for both bike and ped improvements. And we are very much intent on incorporating these projects, but it is a balancing act between other priorities and just available funding.
So can you comment also on the priorities of transportation projects falling north of Central Expressway versus south of Central Expressway? Because my impression is that with the southern side of town being wealthier and containing downtown, tends to get a lot more attention. Like the mid-block crossings went in on Dana and the other two further south, far in advance of when this one is going to get done in 2023. And I get an impression, although I don't have a whole lot of data to back it up, that our side of Mountain View is typically seen only as a way of getting people from the south side of Mountain View up to 101 or to Google, and that in general we are a lower priority on the city's list.
Sure. So we don't prioritize different parts of the city differently. Again, it's going back to identifying what projects are needed and through the studies. And so we've identified obviously the corridor study, and we also use the previously or the current bike transportation plan update, and which has been rolled into with all the other precise plans, Access Mountain View plan, to kind of do a holistic review of what are all the improvements needed. And then we start chipping away at identifying funding sources and where improvements are needed based on feedback from the community. And that's why we're here, in addition to kind of identify, here's a corridor project that we've been wanting to do. We've gotten a grant funding for it, which we're very excited about, and we were hoping to implement it quickly with the grant funding and the community's input on this. And we, again, if there's specific improvements that you're looking for, we utilize that data and that feedback from the community on identifying, yes, we're seeing a need here by the community, and we'll look at improving it, because the host of projects that are in our Access MV plan for bike and ped improvements is quite long, and so we just start chipping away at the list.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
James Kuzmal, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to, since it came up briefly previously, I just wanted to interrogate a bit more to make sure I understand exactly how it is that the 85th percentile rule is limiting our ability to sort of mess with speed limits on these sorts of roads. You mentioned that, obviously if that legislative bill passes that removes that'll be a non-issue going forwards, but it sort of always seemed a bit confusing to me that we can't lower the speed limits, or we can't implement some sort of traffic calming that would let us lower the speed limits. And my assumption has been that on most of our congested roads, the speed limit is not what's limiting the throughput of vehicles anyways. So I guess I just wanted to understand better how we're being constrained in our ability to control the speed limits on these roads.
Okay, so in order to establish a speed limit, an engineering and traffic survey has to be done. And the components of that survey involve taking the speeds of vehicles, free flow speed of vehicles through that area. And a collision factor, there's a line of sight, there's multiple things that are done as part of that engineering and traffic study. So in order for us to post a speed, we have to do that study and then certify the study, and then it becomes enforceable. The speed limit becomes enforceable. As I mentioned before, we can't arbitrarily just pick a speed limit and establish that, because it's not enforceable unless there's a study backing it. But like was mentioned, if the law changes, we'll have to adjust our methods in order to accommodate those changes.
So the sequence of events, like right now, if we really wanted to lower speed limit on road, would be first we would have to implement some things that we think would reduce the speed limit based on well-known traffic design or whatever. Implement those, then do a traffic study of all of that, and then use the results from that to post a new speed limit, and then that new speed limit would be enforceable?
Yes. If the improvements resulted in a reduction of speeds and the 85th percentile drops, then we can then establish a lower speed limit.
But then that would force there to be sort of an interim period where there would be like a posted, say, 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, even though the traffic calming may make it, say, functionally infeasible to go at that speed.
I suppose once the project is implemented, then we can do a survey immediately after it's constructed.
Okay.
But
okay. How long does it take typically, or how expensive and how long is it to typically do those sorts of surveys?
Oh, it's not very long at all, honestly.
Okay. All right, thanks. That helps me better understand things a bit.
Sure.
So there's a few other things that I could add, thanks to Rhea Lowe, one of our transportation manager for the city. She just wanted to comment, something that we've mentioned before, is that the narrower travel lane for cars will have a slowing effect, even if it's not considered a traffic calming element. We still believe that going from a 15 to an 11-foot travel lane is going to have an effect on travel speeds. And also, we want to make sure that folks on the call are aware that the city is embarking on an Access MV plan, and that provides an objective citywide framework for prioritizing. Her number here is hundreds of projects in the city, so we have a lot of transportation and traffic projects across pedestrian and bike studies, and so bringing all of those together into one umbrella framework with Access MV provides an objective framework for us to really go forward with city transportation and traffic projects. And then the other part of the Shoreline Boulevard corridor study was the Castro grade separation. So that's another very large project the city is embarking in. It took a lot of resources. So that's another individual project that came out of this study. And Bruce mentioned that not only Access MV is a city effort, but also the active transportation plan and the Vision Zero goals. So all of those work together to get us really objective and clear city priorities.
All right.
Well, great.
Thanks, Robert, for taking care of the chat box. Looks like if you have any last-minute questions or comments, feel free to put in the chat box at this moment. But just wanted to start thanking everyone for their good questions, their comments. We definitely noted a couple of things here. Thanks to the city staff who helped out with answering these questions. And again, thanks, Robert, for taking care and facilitating all of the conversations.
You're welcome.
All right, and so before so I think not many further questions coming in the chat box or raised hands. I might just go ahead and wrap up tonight's presentation. Does that sound like a good plan, Robert?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, thank you. So thank you again, everyone, for your participation and taking the time to attend tonight's meeting. If you have any further questions or feedback, comments on this project, feel free to reach me at my email address posted right here. You know, if you have any questions that come to mind following tonight, you could reach me at this email. And you can also refer to the city website. I know I referred to it before, letting you know that this presentation and recording of the meeting will be posted on there. So the link is here below. If you aren't able to record it right now, you could also email me and I can send it to you. But this website will pretty much have project updates for for a lot of our city public works department projects, including this one. So just feel free to scroll down to Stierlin Road Improvements Project and you'll find updates on there. And I think with that said, again, just wanted to make sure there's any more questions. No, looks good. All right, thanks.
That's great.
So yeah, so I think with that, I'll just go ahead and end tonight's meeting. Thank you again, everyone, for your time and participation. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.